Welcome back, guys. I'm just going to be briefly going through just a very simple setup to do landmine exercises at home. So if you have gotten yourself a barbell, my last video I just talked about a really cheap barbell that I picked up locally, but you don't have, say, a bench or a squat rack, so you're just doing a lot of rows and deadlifts right now. If that is you, landmines are a very great way to kind of help compensate for the movement patterns that you might be missing. So if you are looking to squat, you can do a landmine squat. There's landmine press variations that you can do, other deadlifting single leg movements that you can try out as well. So I'm just going to briefly show you how I set up for a landmine at my house. Generally, I like to find a corner to kind of wedge one end of the barbell in, but if you don't have that, another thing I recently tried out was I stuck one end of the barbell with a shoe that I don't really care about. So a shoe that you can completely disregard, find one of those and jam one end of your barbell into that shoe, and depending on the surface that you're on, if the surface is actually a little bit jagged, then it's actually going to have more friction and the shoe will be able to grab onto the flooring a little bit better. So the rougher the surface, it might be better as long as there's no debris or dirt or any other tiny rock particles there. So one thing I do want to make note of is that when you're using the shoe method, you'll have to be a bit careful on exercises where you might want to be a little bit more explosive. So for example, if you want to do a landmine push press, for example, especially if you're planning to add some load onto one end of the barbell, say you do have some plates to add onto the bar, but you also want to perform those power movements where you're doing a push press or maybe even a split jerk, I do recommend that you do be a bit more careful and proceed with caution, because the shoe can only give so much grip. It's not going to add any weight. Obviously, when you're doing a landmine, you're going to be in this downward angle where you're holding up the high end, and the weight that is slanting down towards the other end is going to be the anchoring point where it holds it down. But especially if you don't have a corner to kind of pin it up against, then there's just more room for error, more room for it to kind of move about. And if anything, the moment, especially when you're doing a very power focused movement, your movement accuracy can be a little bit inaccurate. When it comes to that, the shoe on the other end of the barbell actually might lift up off the floor, and it might actually end up sliding forward a little bit, so it can be a bit dangerous. So the shoe method is only when you're doing something a little bit more static, a little bit slower paced, or if you're handling something, if you are doing a power-based movement, you're handling it with a bit of a lighter weight. So essentially what I'm saying is just be smart doing it in a controlled environment. So if you guys can find yourself a corner like I did right over here, you can continue to use the shoe as a bit of a cushioning and wedge it into that corner. But what you can also do is just find a crap ton of towels or any cloth, something that you're not going to use, something soft, and maybe eventually toss out, then jam it into that corner and then just wedge your barbell in there, and that actually might hold a little bit better than the shoe does. So there's so many different exercises that you can actually do with a landmine. So for shoulders, you can do a half kneeling shoulder arm press. You can also switch it up, do it on the other side. I can always go in depth of how to do each of these exercises in the future, so do let me know if you guys do want me to go over each of one of these exercises. Another press variation that you can do, there's also the supine. Supine just means that you're laying on your back. So supine, just single arm chest press with the neutral grip on the barbell. I do recommend this way of doing the chest press because when you're descending on the press, your elbow, which is going to be stacked, where your wrist is going to be stacked over your elbow, is going to be descending down in a bit of an arc rather than a straight down next to your shoulder if I'm in a bench press right here. So when you're doing a bench press, you're never going to be going down straight onto the side. You're going to be going down a bit of an arc So if I'm lying this way, it's gonna create a bit of a curve on the way down. So when you wedge one end of the bar onto the corner like that and you press up and down, it is going to go replicate a similar curve like that as you would in a bit of a bench press. If your toes are towards the wedged inside of the bar, that same movement is not going to be as obvious and it's going to feel super awkward. So like, you can actually try it out if you want to. Even if you were to be perpendicular to the bar as well, you're going to be starting out close to your chest at the bottom, and when you press out, you'll push out to the side where you're no longer stacked, and that's going to also really offset your balance as well for the movement. Another thing you can try doing is, like I mentioned earlier, a landmine squat, where the end that you're holding is just close up against your chest. You have to be a little bit forward leaning, but as long as you got that lean going, you'll be able to go through that fuller range of a squat. The only reason that you want to be forward leaning is because the angle of the bar changes as you're going up and down. So moving on, here's another exercise that you can do, which is just a bent over single arm row, where you're just supporting yourself on with your free arm on one of your laps or your leg, and you're just doing how you would do a regular row. The only thing is that the movement is just going to be a lot more frequently consistent. Now here is another exercise that you can try out. This one's a little bit more advanced. There's progressions that lead up to this exercise. It's a single leg RDL with a landmine, and there's a lot that can actually happen in here. I know a lot of people do these incorrectly, where their hip starts to open up, they're not engaging their glute medius as much, knees are buckling everywhere. A lot of people kind of get worried about reaching towards the floor a little bit more rather than leading with their legs back up. So I see a lot of errors when people performing these movements. It can be super beneficial, but if you're not doing the movement correctly, then you're not going to reap the most benefit out of the movements. That is another thing I can talk about. There's lots of content that I can keep talking about, but the main purpose of this video is to just educate you guys on the variation of landmine exercises that you guys can do. So I just went over a bunch of landmine variation. Rather, I only went over 5 exercises, but I think these are quite useful. You have your half kneeling shoulder press, you have your single arm neutral grip chest press. You also got your bigger compound movement, the landmine squat. We have our single arm bent over row with the landmine, and then the last bit is the single leg RDL, or the single leg Romanian deadlift. So if any of you guys have any questions on how to perform some of these movements, or even maybe progressions in terms of working your way into this level of movement, or if you want to even proceed into something a little bit more advanced, do let me know in the comment section below. If you guys really enjoyed this video or this type of content, this one, I know I'm pumping out different types of content all the time right now, but the more you guys kind of see it, I kind of like to test out everything, so you guys will get to know me a little bit better as I go through these videos. So if you guys like this type of content, this type of video, let me know in the comment sections below. Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, I don't care. That's your opinion, we can have our opinions. And lastly, if you guys do like it, subscribe, continue the journey with me. I would super duper appreciate that as someone who's just starting out. As I'm recording this now, I just hit 18 subscribers, so I think last video I said 12 subscribers, so 6 more people hopped on board, so that was super nice. I think most of them are my friends, but you know what, I'll take it, man. I'll take anyone. But yeah, you guys take care, stay safe out there. Happy training if you guys are continuing on with your pursuit. Even if you guys aren't training, I highly do recommend that you guys continue moving, especially as a kid. Obviously I'm going to be biased towards this, but yes, that is what I do recommend. So stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.